What does this trip mean for Australia?
This is enormously important because apart from attending the D-Day commemorations in France, this is the first time the King, since being diagnosed with cancer, has visited another country. This is a significant distance to come. The fact he's chosen Australia when there's plenty of other Commonwealth countries he could have chosen is enormously significant and shows and speaks to the fondness that he has for the country. The fact that they're prepared to make that long visit for what is effectively only a 5 to 6 day trip to Australia. They've had to cut out New Zealand, of course. They're timing it with the Chogam visit in Samoa. But nevertheless, it's a huge honour, I think, to Australia.
And how special is it that despite the fact he's had cancer, he's gone through treatment, he's still making Australia his priority?
Absolutely, and we don't really know where his cancer is at. We've obviously had the updates with the Princess of Wales, but the King hasn't given us an update as to where his cancer is at, apart from to say that he has been going through treatment. So very significant that at a time when he's, anyone who's gone through cancer feels beleaguered, can feel tired. The fact that he's prepared to make that long journey speaks volumes about not only what he feels about Australia, but what he feels about his position and the monarchy and how important it is as a man in his mid-70s to continue to do the work that his mother set out to do.
How much will this starve off the Republican movement in Australia? Because there's been rumbles under the surface, particularly since the Queen passed. But do you think that this will put that to bed now?
Well, look, even mutterings within the palace when the Queen died was that, they would suddenly start to drop countries and that people wouldn't, have that affection and loyalty that they had to the Queen. But I think that the mood on the streets, I get stopped in the supermarket all the time and asked about the royals because, it's a specialty subject for me. I think there's a real passion and interest in them. Now, whether it's an interest that is reflective of the honour of the monarchy and what it stands for, or whether there's a more kind of prurient, interest in them, more like a Kardashian celebrity type thing. It's interesting to see. But there's a lot of conflict, a lot of drama in the royal family at the moment. So I think that interest is still high. And there's obviously the referendum back in 99 didn't get across the line. There's no push for it at the moment that you're hearing about with any kind of commitment.
Let's go back in history a little bit. Tell us about the King's time at Timbertop.
So he went there as a 17-year-old. He went there sort of to get the posh bits knocked off him. He's talked about that. He said it was a very happy time of his life. In fact, he ended up spending 2 terms rather than 1 term there. He was referred to as a pommy bastard by some of his fellow classmates, but he always speaks of that time in his life fondly. He's been back to Timbertops for celebrations and anniversaries. And it was a time in his life, he was at Gordonston in Scotland, which was a very unhappy schooling period for him. So to go to this place, which we know he's always had this affection for nature, for the outdoors, for the climate, and he was really immersed in, the Australian bush, which was a beautiful time for him. Look, he said it was hard. He said there was going up hills in, a blood-stained shirt and that sort of thing. But whenever asked about it, there's a smile on his face.
And, it's kind of funny that a prince, a wealthy prince, comes to Australia in the middle of the bush, in the alpine parts of Victoria. Did it rough him up a little bit?
It did rough him up a little bit because, the thing about Australians is as he said, they call a spade a spade. And he talks about this anecdote about when he had to go and check on the younger boys and he walked into the room at night and it was raining, he had an umbrella and he said as he was leaving, this is the time that he was called a pommy bastard. And look, he laughs about it. He's very fond of that time. But I think what's really interesting is that all members of the royal family have an affection with those countries they went to when they were younger. If you think about William and Harry, they have a tremendous affection for Africa. Harry, Lesotho, William, Kenya. The Queen Mother had enormous affection for Canada. She always wanted to go back there. The Queen Elizabeth wanted to go to Malta because she'd had some very happy before her reign. She spent a lot of time there with Prince Philip. So I think having these connections that are away from the country that they grew up in, it's almost like a gap year for them. These experiences that they wouldn't ordinarily have.
What are some of the more iconic memories of Prince Charles's time here in Australia?
Well, the number one iconic memory, of course, was when he was still a bachelor and he was kissed on the beach in Cottesloe in WA. He was coming out of the water. A very pretty young model, 26-year-old model Jane Priest, ran up to him, planted a kiss on him. She was kind of set up to do it by a photographer, and I've worked a lot with British photographers and I know they always want the picture, but at the time there was this sort of thought that it made him look more dateable. And of course, not long after that, he met his wife, Princess Diana. So maybe it worked.
What about that interview on Countdown, Molly Meldrum with a young Prince Charles? What a disaster.
That interview with Molly Meldrum, when the then Prince Charles sat down, and look, Charles trying not to laugh, but Molly just totally losing it, sweating, swearing, can't get his words right. I mean, it's one of the funniest things. And then, of course, the king, well, then he was the prince, his then takedown of that when it was a Countdown anniversary, and the way that he just took the mickey out of Molly Meldrum, I thought was hilarious. And it shows the royals, you know, the Queen has a sense of humour. The Paddington Bear video, all sorts of, I think they really like to engage with ordinary people and ordinary life, and sometimes when things go wrong, it creates memories for them. We just don't need it to be picture perfect all the time. That's the things that make their working lives memorable, I think.